Let's look at another example of a psychological injury, brooding and rumination, which I say is like picking at emotional scabs. Now look, it's natural to reflect about distressing or upsetting experiences when we have them. It's a natural thing. The people can really go over in their minds about the breakup, or, your boss yelled at you in a meeting in front of everyone and you were really, really upset about it, and so you stew about it, and so you think about it. But the problem is, sometimes you get stuck and you can't stop thinking about it. And then the next day you're thinking about it, and then on the weekend you're calling all your friends, and then this happened, and he said this, and it was so embarrassing, and you keep thinking about it, and you see the boss's face, and you relive what happened over and over and over again, and then you start introducing fantasy versions. There's the heroic version, where you imagine yourself that, you stood up to the boss, and you screamed back, and everyone applauded, and they carried you out on their shoulders, and it was terrific. And then you have, like the victim version, where you broke down crying in that version after the boss yells at you, and the boss realizes he was a real schmuck, and so he says, "I'm so sorry," and he learns his lesson. Or you have the tragic version where you stood up to the boss, but then you got fired, and then you lost your job, and now you're homeless and living on the streets. Whatever it is, it's the same initial thing over and over and over and over in your head. And people will sometimes come to me and they'll want to talk about the same thing for months on end, and they'll say to me, when I object, they'll say to me, but it was only 3 months ago, and you're a psychologist. You should be thrilled that I'm expressing my feelings. And I'm like, well, I'm actually not thrilled. This is not my thrilled face, because there is a big difference, which I really want you to understand as a result of this, between adaptive, useful, healthy self-reflection and maladaptive, not useful, unhealthy self-reflection. Let's look at the difference. It's a really important thing. When you're self-reflecting in a way that's adaptive, that's useful, the goal of it is to ease your emotional distress. That's what should happen. What should happen is that when you then think of the upsetting or distressing event, it has less emotional potency. That's the goal, right? Now, why does it have less emotional potency? Because you are gaining new insights and fresh perspectives, and you're learning things. You're realizing, for example, now that I think about it, before the boss yelled at me, they made that suggestion which I criticized in front of everyone. So I stepped on their toes, which is why they stepped on my toes. Lesson learned, don't criticize the boss in a meeting. You learn that. Or you talk to colleagues who say, the boss is always really difficult with new hires, but then they get to like you, so it's just getting through the first few months, and you realize, okay. Or they tell you the boss actually has an anger management issue, and this is going to be bad for a long time, and you feel, I'm going straight to human resources and seeing if I can transfer. You figure out what you need to do. You figure out any action you need to take. You get a new understanding of it. You get a fresh perspective of it. And once you get it, I figured that out, you can move on. And it eases the tension. It eases the stress. It eases the distress once you figure it out. So that's what happened when your self-reflection is adaptive. Here's what happened when it's not. When self-reflection is maladaptive, then we just replay the same events over and over and over again. There is no insight. There is no learning. There is no fresh perspective. We're just replaying it. But each time we do, we're getting more upset, we're getting more angry, we're getting more sad. We are just increasing our emotional distress. We used to think, it's a catharsis, right? Just telling people about it is cathartic, right? And we used to say, like if you're angry, punch a pillow. Who's heard of the punch a pillow theory, right? Now, there was a movie a while ago with Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal. Analyze this. And Billy Crystal, a while ago, meaning like 20 years. But, Billy Crystal plays a psychiatrist, and Robert De Niro plays a mobster with anger management issues. And he's sitting in the session, and Billy Crystal says, well, if you feel so angry, you can punch the pillow. And Robert De Niro goes, okay, takes out a gun and shoots the pillow 3 times. And Billy Crystal is all around, and he goes, feel better? And Robert De Niro goes, yeah, I do feel better. That's Hollywood. it's a movie. It actually is not true, because there are plenty of studies that show that when you get people angry and you have half the group punch the pillow and think of the person who angered them, and half the group just think of the person who angered them without punching the pillow, then the people who punch the pillow end up feeling much more angry than the other people, much more aggressive afterwards than the other people, and much more likely to take out that aggression on innocent bystanders around them, say like friends and family. So that catharsis model is wrong. You know, we still have psychologists who have in their office the plastic bats and the human forms. And there was once, this was quite a few years ago, but I was observing a session. There was a 7-year-old bruiser with a plastic bat smashing this figure while the therapist was cooing on the side and going, "Yes, you're very angry at Daddy." And I'm like, "Oh, I feel like issuing a warning to Daddy about what happens when that kid gets home. That's not helpful." It doesn't work, the catharsis theory. But the other thing that happens is the more you ruminate, the more you think about the angering or the upsetting event, the more likely you are to want to think about it. You're increasing the urge to ruminate about it. You're increasing the likelihood of it popping into your head unbidden. And you're feeling very, very, that it's very important that you think it through. That's what you're actually doing. And you're making it a little addictive. It can become like heroin. It just keeps appearing and you have to think about it, and you have heroin without the high. So really, and it's very, very difficult to stop, because it's more and more and more, and you're not aware you're doing something that's damaging. Our insides are telling us this is important to think through, but there is no thinking through. We're just replaying like hamsters caught in this emotional wheel that doesn't go anywhere. And the other thing it does is it actually impairs our problem solving over time, because we are spending so much time stewing instead of doing. We're spending so much time thinking of all the problems without how to solve them, that we are getting used to not being able to solve problems. Here's an unfortunate study that they did. They looked at women who found a lump in their breast, and they divided the group of women into women who had a tendency to ruminate and women who did not have a tendency to ruminate. And the women who had a tendency to ruminate waited on average 2 months longer to make an appointment with their doctor after finding a lump in their breast. 2 months after finding a lump. Because they were so used to just worrying and stewing and not doing, they weren't used to doing. So it impairs our problem solving. It makes us more passive. And it predisposes us to depression. Why? Because think of how much stage time is caught up with the bad thing, the upsetting thing, the angering thing, the thing that made you feel victimized and bad and weak and small. It's so much stage time, that's what you're coloring your world as. Negative, upsetting, angering. So it predisposes you to depression. It predisposes you to eating disorders, because we manage our feelings with food a lot of the time. And it predisposes us to alcohol, because if you're going to get so irritable all the time, you need to take the edge off at the end of the day. And people can literally develop problems because of it. And you're releasing such a chronic amount of stress hormones into your bloodstream that people who have a tendency to ruminate and to brood are at much, much higher risk for cardiovascular disease over time. So that's something we really, really need to not do.